Tonight, at this lonely hour when most of the world has surrendered to sleep, I want to take you somewhere deeper than ordinary thought, deeper than comfort, deeper even than hope. Because tonight we're entering the strange, electric mind of Friedrich Nietzsche, the man who believed that behind every human triumph, every failure, every love affair, every political upheaval, every quiet act of self-sabotage, lies a pattern, a formula, a blueprint of tragedy that repeats through history, through art, through culture, and through you. Nietzsche believed we suffer not because life is cruel, or unpredictable, or meaningless, but because we do not understand the forces inside us, the forces fighting for control, the forces tearing our lives apart, the forces shaping the person we think we are, and the one we are too afraid to become. Tonight, I want to show you why we destroy ourselves. Not as a flaw, not as a mistake, but as part of a deeper, older rhythm of human existence. One Nietzsche believed was encoded in the origins of Greek tragedy itself. So dim the lights. Lay back. Let your breathing slow. Let's descend into the blueprint of human tragedy. Let's explore why we sabotage our own lives, and how to finally understand the forces pulling the strings. Friedrich Nietzsche opens the birth of tragedy with a claim so bold, so strange, and so unsettling that even modern philosophy rarely touches it with bare hands. The idea that human suffering, the very architecture of tragedy, is born from two ancient forces locked inside every one of us, the Apollonian and the Dionysian, order and chaos, logic and ecstasy, self-control and self-annihilation. These are not poetic categories, they are not metaphors. For Nietzsche, they are the primordial engines that build civilization and tear the individual apart from the inside. We destroy ourselves, he argues, because these two forces are always at war within the human soul. And most people never learn to see the battle, let alone understand it. Nietzsche believed that the Greeks, especially the Greeks of the tragic age, were not simply dramatists or poets, but surgeons of the human psyche. They understood, better than anyone before or after, that the human being is not one unified thing, but a battlefield of impulses. A stage where our dreams and our intoxications, our illusions and our truths fight for control. Tragedy was not meant to entertain, it was meant to expose the war within us, to hold up a mirror to the part of us we hide even from ourselves. But the tragedy of modern life, Nietzsche says, is that we have forgotten how to look. The Apollonian and Dionysian forces have not vanished. They have simply gone underground, quietly pulling us apart. And because we no longer recognize these forces, we misinterpret the internal conflict as depression, anxiety, disorientation, restlessness, self-loathing, or self-destruction. We think something is wrong with us personally. We think we're broken. We think our struggles are private failures. But Nietzsche's view is far more terrifying and far more liberating. Nothing is wrong with you. You are simply living a war that every culture, every individual, and every era must confront. He begins with the Apollonian, the god Apollo, whom he interprets as the embodiment of order, clarity, selfhood, boundaries, identity, and the dream world of carefully arranged illusions that protect us from the violent truth of existence. Apollo is the part of us that creates stories about who we are, the part that smooths the rough edges of reality, the part that insists on self-control, dignity, rationality, predictability. Without Apollo, we would dissolve into madness. Without Apollo, civilization collapses. Without Apollo, there is no I. But Nietzsche argues that Apollo is also the god of illusion, the veil we draw over the terrifying chaos beneath everyday life. Apollo is the boundary that keeps us from staring too deeply into our own abyss. And in that boundary lies the first seed of human tragedy, the illusion of self. Because if Apollo creates the individual, Dionysus seeks to dissolve it. Dionysus is the god of intoxication, not simply drunkenness, but the psychological and spiritual state in which the boundary of the self disintegrates. Dionysus is unity, ecstasy, chaos energy, instinct, music, surrender, and the collapse of individuality into something larger and more primal. Dionysus is the scream under the mask, the heartbeat under the logic, the wild, irrational, ancient rhythm of human passion that the modern world tries desperately to control. For Nietzsche, every person carries these two forces. Apollo constructs you, Dionysus dissolves you. But here is the first devastating insight. We are torn apart because these forces are not supposed to be balanced peacefully. They are meant to clash. Their conflict is not a malfunction. It is the source of all human creativity, beauty, destruction, and despair. The Greeks knew this, Nietzsche says. They built tragedy as a way of confronting the tension honestly, instead of hiding from it the way modern society does. They understood that when Apollo becomes too strong, we lose the ability to feel. We become rigid creatures of logic, control, and superficial order. We live as masks instead of selves. We follow rules instead of instincts. We become polished, but hollow. And when Dionysus becomes too strong, the self collapses into chaos. Boundaries break down. Emotions flood the system. Lives become ruled by impulse, addiction, self-destruction, and collapse. Without Apollo, there is no shape. Without Dionysus, there is no life. The Greeks believed the tragic human was the one who lived between these worlds, torn, conflicted, but aware. Modern humans are not aware. Nietzsche believed that our era suffers because it has lost the ability to see the war within. We try to solve spiritual tension with pharmaceuticals, with politics, with productivity systems, with psychological labels, with lifestyle trends, with endless self-improvement strategies, not understanding that the struggle is ancient, not personal. It cannot be solved. It must be confronted. This is where Nietzsche's thought becomes radical. Self-destruction is not a malfunction. It is what happens when one force overwhelms the other. When Apollo suppresses Dionysus too much, the human eventually shatters under the pressure of being too controlled. When Dionysus overwhelms Apollo, the human dissolves into impulsivity, addiction, chaos, and collapse. This is not psychology. This is ontology. It is about the structure of being alive. Take modern ambition, Nietzsche suggests. The Apollonian drive pushes us toward order, discipline, self-mastery, long-term strategy, clarity, progress. It builds careers, reputations, identities, brands, relationships, but it also constructs illusions. The illusion that we must always be perfect. The illusion that we can control everything. The illusion that we are not allowed to break. And beneath that illusion seethes the Dionysian drive, the desire to escape, to feel, to break free of constraints, to abandon the suffocating order of modern expectation. The desire for intensity, for danger, for surrender. This is why people destroy their own lives, not because they are weak, but because one of these forces becomes unbalanced. When Apollo dominates, the individual becomes a prisoner of self-image and collapses under the unbearable pressure of control. When Dionysus dominates, the individual becomes a creature of impulse, trapped in cycles of thrill-seeking, escapism, addiction, or emotional collapse. Nietzsche believed that true tragedy and true wisdom exists precisely in the awareness of this conflict. The Greeks put their heroes in impossible situations because they understood something modern humans do not. Existence is inherently tragic, not because life is sad, but because life is conflict. Nietzsche's message is not pessimistic. It is honest. Tragedy was meant to teach us how to endure the tension without lying to ourselves. Something modern culture refuses to do. Instead, we pick one side. We become Apollonian, rigid, rational, orderly, anxious, perfectionist, image-obsessed. Or we become Dionysian, chaotic, impulsive, disoriented, overwhelmed, constantly seeking escape. And in choosing one side, we lose the ability to live fully. Part of our self-destruction comes from misunderstanding what these forces actually are. Apollo is not good. Dionysus is not bad. Apollo is not morality. Dionysus is not immorality. These categories did not exist for Nietzsche. Instead, Apollo gives you form. Dionysus gives you life. Apollo draws the mask. Dionysus shatters it. Apollo is boundaries. Dionysus is experience. Apollo is the dream. Dionysus is the underlying truth. Human beings destroy themselves because they try to live entirely in one force. The Apollonian person becomes crushed by the emotional storms they suppress. The Dionysian person becomes swallowed by the forces they unleash. And modern society, obsessed with control, order, productivity, logic, has become pathologically Apollonian, producing generations of people unable to face their own chaos. Nietzsche believed the modern world was sick because it killed the Dionysian spirit, the spirit of music, ecstasy, unity, instinct, the part of us that accepts suffering and pleasure as inseparable, the part that allows us to dissolve into something larger than ourselves. This is why modern people feel empty, why we sabotage relationships, why we break down at the height of success, why we chase intensity that destroys us, why we feel disconnected from meaning, why anxiety and depression saturate our era, why we feel like strangers in our own lives. The modern human is over-Apollonized, too controlled, too polished, too rational, too self-contained, too individual, too separate from instinct, music, chaos, community, and the primal energy of existence. And because we repress Dionysus, we experience it only in self-destructive bursts. Binge behaviours, emotional breakdowns, toxic relationships, thrill chasing, and self-sabotage. Dionysus emerges violently because he has been trapped. Nietzsche believed that the purpose of tragedy was not to entertain or moralise, but to reintegrate these forces, to bring Apollo and Dionysus into a shared space, a place where the individual can experience the duality without collapsing into either extreme. When tragedy dies, self-destruction rises. In the next part, we will explore why Nietzsche believed modern society killed tragedy, and how that cultural murder created the psychological collapse of the modern individual. We left off with a dangerous idea, that when tragedy dies, self-destruction rises. Nietzsche believed ancient tragedy was not just an art form, but a medicine, a way for human beings to face the horrors and contradictions of existence without collapsing. When the medicine is removed, the disease does not vanish. It goes untreated. It grows. It finds new, twisted ways of expressing itself in individuals and cultures. To understand why we destroy ourselves, Nietzsche says, we have to understand not just the forces inside us, but also what happened in history when a new kind of mind appeared, the mind that believed everything could be solved through logic. For Nietzsche, this turning point arrives in the figure of Socrates. Before Socrates, Greek tragedy was born of the tension between Apollonian form and Dionysian frenzy. The tragic hero stood on the edge of chaos, facing forces beyond any rational understanding, brought down not because he was bad or immoral, but because existence itself is tragic, shot through with suffering, randomness, necessity, and forces bigger than individual intention. Oedipus does everything he can to avoid the prophecy, and yet, precisely through his efforts to escape fate, he fulfills it. This is the tragic insight. Not that mistakes cause suffering, but that existence itself is structured in a way that cannot be fully controlled. Socrates represents something entirely new, the belief that everything can be understood, explained, and justified by reason. He is the theoretical man, as Nietzsche calls him, the one who believes that if we just think hard enough, if we question long enough, if we analyse sharply enough, we will uncover a rational structure behind everything, and thereby master life. Where tragedy says, you will suffer, and you will not always understand why Socrates says, if you do not understand, you have not yet asked the right questions. And this shift, this move from accepting the tragic to insisting on explanation, is, for Nietzsche, the moment when tragedy begins to die. Once you believe that reason can fix everything, you can no longer truly believe in tragedy. You can criticize it, you can dissect it, you can interpret it, but it no longer possesses that dark, sacred, Dionysian power to pull you beyond yourself and confront you with the raw truth of existence. Tragedy, under the gaze of Socratic reason, becomes a story about moral errors, psychological flaws, or correctable mistakes. The hero is no longer a symbolic figure through whom we experience the clash between human limitation and cosmic necessity. He is an object of analysis. We turn him into a case study. Nietzsche sees Euripides, the later tragic playwright, as the artistic partner of Socrates. Euripides begins to smuggle rational, argumentative, explainable motives into the tragic world. His characters talk like philosophers. They give reasons. They justify themselves to the audience. They argue. The chorus wants the Dionysian heartbeat of the play, an anonymous collective voice of the people. The earth, the gods, is gradually pushed aside. What remains are psychological individuals explaining themselves. Tragedy loses its mysterious musical foundation and becomes something like philosophical theatre, moral, explanatory, and guided by logic. The wild god Dionysus is still mentioned in the text, but he no longer lives in the music. What dies here is not simply a genre of drama. What dies is a way of confronting suffering. When tragedy is replaced by analysis, the audience no longer experiences catharsis through surrender. They do not stand before the abyss and say, "Yes, this is what it means to be alive." Instead, they stand at a safe distance and ask, where did the hero go wrong? The tragic event is no longer a mirror of existence. It is a solvable problem, something to fix, something to diagnose, something to improve. This is when Nietzsche's thought begins to feel eerily modern. Look at how we approach human suffering today. Instead of tragedy, we have case studies. Instead of myth, we have diagnoses and data. Instead of choral music and collective ritual, we have commentary, content, and takes. We pathologize what the Greeks ritualized. We dissect what they dared to worship. And because of that, we are left with a strange emptiness. We understand more and endure less. Nietzsche is not saying that reason is bad or that science is worthless. He is saying that when reason tries to rule absolutely, when it believes it can replace art, myth, and tragedy, it turns against the deepest needs of the human being. We do not just need explanations, we need experiences that allow us to bear the reality that cannot be explained. When reason declares that it can solve everything, it must deny the tragic. It must deny the irrational. It must deny the aspects of life that do not fit into clarity, arguments, and neat conclusions. But these denied forces do not disappear. They sink into the unconscious, into culture, into art, into addiction, into politics, into patterns of self-sabotage. For Nietzsche, the spirit of Socrates lives on in the modern obsession with transparency, our urge to explain, label, diagnose, and categorize every aspect of human life. We want reasons for why we are sad, reasons for why we fail, reasons for why relationships fall apart, reasons for why we feel empty. We turn our lives into data sets. We treat our inner storms as problems to be analysed, instead of truths to be endured. We want Apollo to win completely. We want the world to be made of clear lines, straight logic, rational motives, predictable outcomes. But underneath this Apollonian rule, Dionysus is not dead. He is in exile. This exile appears in the way we chase intensity through self-destructive paths. We look for Dionysian release in substances, in emotional chaos, in obsession, in thrill-seeking, in online outrage, in catastrophes we secretly manufacture. When culture removes sacred spaces for ecstasy, music as devotion, festivals as ceremony, death as ritual, tragedy as spiritual confrontation, those energies do not go away. They move into the shadows. They reappear as compulsions, as breakdowns, as lives mysteriously derailed at the moment of success, as inner voices that say, burn it down, without our fully understanding why. Nietzsche thinks the Greeks were wiser than us in one crucial way. They had the courage to give form to madness. They did not pretend that life was rational. They did not hide their terror of existence behind technical language. They took the chaos seriously enough to build art around it. Dionysian festivals, frenzied dances, orgiastic celebrations, tragic plays. These were not frivolous entertainments. They were ways of letting the irrational part of the human being breathe, move, sing, scream, cry, and be seen. Apollo and Dionysus were allowed to coexist. The city built temples for both. Modern culture builds skyscrapers for Apollo and leaves Dionysus wandering. We take our pain to screens. We medicate away silence. We avoid deep grief by keeping ourselves always busy. We substitute content for confrontation. We watch stories and listen to music, but they no longer act as rituals that bind us to the truth of existence. They are distractions, background noise, something to pass the time. And slowly, a strange pressure builds up inside, a feeling that life is hollow, or fake, or oddly weightless. A sense that something is missing, even when everything seems fine. From Nietzsche's perspective, that something is not a belief system, or a moral crusade, or a new ideology. It is the Dionysian element, the chance to lose ourselves safely, deeply, meaningfully. The chance to experience unity beyond the prison of the ego. The chance to accept that we are not fully in control, and that this does not mean we are failures. The chance to feel suffering as part of a larger rhythm instead of a personal punishment. This is where music becomes essential for Nietzsche. In The Birth of Tragedy, he says that music is the purest expression of the Dionysian. It does not show images, it does not argue, it does not explain. It speaks directly to the willing, feeling, pulsing core of our being. It goes beneath language and stirs something older than thought. For Nietzsche, tragedy was born when this Dionysian music was given Apollonian form on stage. The chorus sang and moved as the embodiment of a collective, primordial feeling. The actors embodied individuals caught in the storm of fate. Music connected the audience to the underlying chaos of existence. The visual form of the play gave that chaos shape. For a few hours, the Apollonian and Dionysian were reconciled, not by being merged into one, but by being allowed to dance together. When modern music becomes mere sound painting, as Nietzsche says, imitation of storms, battles, moods, or scenes, it loses its mythic power and becomes entertainment. When drama becomes argument and character study, it loses its connection to the underlying music of existence. When both collapse into surface-level stimulation, we are left with culture that distracts but does not transform. We can spend entire lives consuming stories and songs without ever truly facing what tragedy was designed to reveal. That our lives are finite, fragile, conflicted, and not fully under our control. And that there is a strange, fierce beauty in that fact. This is why Nietzsche thinks the death of tragedy is not an aesthetic issue, but a spiritual one. When a culture loses tragedy, it loses the courage to look at suffering without false consolation. It begins to tell itself optimistic stories instead, that everything will get better, that all problems are solvable, that progress will erase pain, that knowledge will eliminate fear, that technology will fix loneliness, that morality will fix cruelty, that therapy will fix meaninglessness. These stories are not evil in themselves, but when they replace tragedy, they become lies we cling to because we cannot bear the truth. And when the truth is refused, it returns in violent ways, inside individuals, inside relationships, inside politics, inside history. Nietzsche believed that a culture which denies the tragic becomes more vulnerable to total breakdowns. People who grow up believing that life is supposed to make sense feel especially betrayed when it doesn't. When the unpredictable happens, loss, betrayal, illness, failure, injustice, they experience not only pain but a deeper shock, the feeling that reality itself has turned against them. Instead of seeing suffering as part of the structure of existence, they interpret it as a glitch, a mistake, or a personal indictment. They collapse. They numb themselves, or they harden and become resentful. Resentment for Nietzsche is the psychological poison that forms when people feel weak, powerless, and unable to accept their suffering. Instead of saying, this is tragic, but it is part of life, they say, someone must be to blame. Instead of transforming pain into strength, they weaponize it into accusation. Instead of confronting the Dionysian, they demonize it. They want revenge on life for being difficult. They want to punish existence itself. We see this everywhere in modern life, the instinct to find culprits for our inner chaos. We blame our parents, our exes, our bosses, our culture, our generation, our biology, our society. Sometimes these critiques are justified. Nietzsche is not saying injustice is imaginary, but he is warning us that beneath many of these narratives is a deeper refusal, the refusal to accept that life is tragic no matter what we do, the refusal to absorb the fact that there will always be forces we cannot control, limits we cannot surpass, losses we cannot prevent. When we refuse this, we become brittle. We oscillate between grand optimism and deep despair. We build identities around our pain. We sabotage long-term possibilities at the first sign of difficulty. We cling to whatever promises comfort, ideologies, addictions, causes, fantasies, if they shield us from staring directly at the tragic structure of life. This, for Nietzsche, is one of the main reasons we destroy ourselves. Not because we are evil, or broken, or cursed, but because we are uninitiated. We live without tragedy. We are spiritually untrained in suffering. We have not learned how to see pain as part of the pattern, so we experience it as an interruption of what should be. We think something has gone wrong with reality, or with us. The Greeks thought something else. Suffering is not the exception. It is woven into the fabric of existence. Tragedy's purpose was to let people feel this without being annihilated by it. To sit in the dark, surrounded by others, and watch human beings on stage suffer, break, choose, fail, and fall. Not to learn a moral lesson, but to feel the strange, painful dignity of being part of a world where such things happen. The audience walked away, not reassured, but strengthened. They had looked into the abyss and stayed. In our world, very few experiences function like that. Most of what we consume either distracts us from the abyss or moralizes it away. Our stories flatter us or frighten us, but they rarely teach us how to endure. And so, when our personal tragedies come, and they always do, we are not ready. We are surprised. We are devastated. We look for someone to sue, someone to blame, someone to punish, someone to cancel. Or we turn inward and punish ourselves. We call it failure. We call it ruin. We call it the end. Nietzsche calls it something else. The moment when you finally meet the truth that tragedy was meant to prepare you for. In the next movement of this episode, we will follow Nietzsche as he searches for a way forward. Is there any hope for a rebirth of tragedy in a world ruled by analysis and optimism? Can modern people relearn how to live with the Apollonian and Dionysian in creative tension instead of self-destructive chaos? And what would it mean personally for you, sitting in the dark right now, to stop running from the tragic and instead learn to carry it? For Nietzsche, one of the most dangerous illusions of modern life is the belief that we can outthink the primal forces within us. We imagine ourselves as rational animals, masters of our impulses, builders of systems and explanations. We believe that therapy, productivity, self-help, or discipline can eliminate our inner chaos. that with enough structure, enough order, enough information, we can seal away the Dionysian and live cleanly inside the Apollonian dream. But Nietzsche warns that this is a catastrophic misunderstanding of human nature. The Apollonian can suppress, organise and beautify, but it cannot eradicate. It can paint over the truth, but it cannot dissolve the truth. And the truth is this: the Dionysian is older than us, older than reason, older than civilization, older than consciousness itself. When Apollo tries to build walls around the soul, Nietzsche says the Dionysian does not disappear. It waits, it simmers, it coils in the dark like a great animal, and sooner or later it returns with a force that terrifies the life of order we have constructed. This is why we sabotage the very things we say we want. Why addicts relapse when everything is going well. Why relationships fall apart precisely when they begin to deepen. Why people quit just before success. Why the disciplined, rigid, high-functioning individual suddenly collapses into chaos, sometimes in a single night. The Dionysian does not respect our schedules. It does not negotiate. It does not ask permission. For Nietzsche, the greatest tragedies in modern life often occur because people mistake repression for strength. We imagine that burying our instincts is bravery, that ignoring our appetite for freedom and intensity is virtue, that treating our inner chaos as an enemy is maturity. But Nietzsche believed that ignoring the Dionysian is not strength, it is naivety. Worse, it is arrogance. The arrogance of thinking that the ancient primal forces that shaped human evolution can be tamed by surface-level habits, productivity hacks, or moral rules. What modern people call self-control, Nietzsche might call self-deception. This deception shows itself in the rhythms of our life. We build strict routines. We craft perfect schedules. We maintain consistent personas. We keep everything clean, tidy, respectable. We say the right things. We curate our image. We stay in our lanes. And then suddenly something inside us snaps. We wake up one morning and feel an overwhelming urge to burn down our own lives, to quit the job, end the relationship, break the rules, close the doors, run away, or explode inwardly. Something erupts that we can no longer contain. This eruption, Nietzsche says, is not madness. It is the overdue return of a suppressed god. To the Greeks, Dionysus was not simply a deity of wine or ecstasy. He was the god of dissolution, the one who dissolves the boundaries of the self. In Dionysian ritual, people lost themselves into dance, music, chant, and collective frenzy. They were freed for a moment from the tight, suffocating sense of me. They dissolved into something larger: the tribe, the music, the earth, the cosmos. And returned reborn. But modern life offers no sacred space for this dissolution. We do not dissolve ourselves, we perform ourselves. We do not surrender, we curate. We do not lose control safely, we lose it destructively. Because when the Dionysian is denied ritual expression, it returns as chaos, not catharsis. Nietzsche warns that many lives collapse, not because they are weak, but because they are too Apollonian, too rigid, too controlled, too committed to self-image. The individual becomes a statue carved from their own expectations, unable to bend, unable to break slowly, so when the pressure builds, they shatter. This shattering appears in burnout, depression, impulsive decisions, emotional explosions, or sudden changes in identity. It can feel like the soul revolting against a life that has become too small. In a deeply modern sense, Nietzsche anticipates what we now call the shadow, the part of the psyche that contains all the instincts, desires, fears, and energies we reject. But Nietzsche goes further. He does not simply say the shadow exists, he says the shadow is divine. It is a god that must be honoured. Ignoring it is sacrilege against our own nature. Where Freud will later claim the unconscious expresses itself through symptoms, Nietzsche claims the unconscious expresses itself through tragedy, through moments when our Apollonian persona loses control and the deeper truths of our being burst through. These moments may feel catastrophic, but they are revelations. They show us who we are beneath the illusions. They show us the forces we have tried to silence. They show us that our suffering is not senseless. It is the return of a forgotten part of ourselves. This is why Nietzsche thinks self-destruction is often a distorted form of self-discovery. When the Dionysian returns violently, its goal is not to hurt us, but to free us, to shatter the illusions that prevent us from living honestly. But if we interpret this eruption as purely pathological, we miss the message. If we view breakdowns as failures rather than transitions, we cannot understand what is being revealed. Nietzsche insists that every collapse contains a truth. Every downward spiral contains a signal. Every moment of self-destruction is also a moment of self-confrontation, if we have the courage to look. This confrontation is what tragedy originally offered. The audience watched a hero fall, not because he made a simple mistake, but because he confronted the forces that structure human existence. The fall illuminated the tension between the Apollonian and Dionysian. The hero's suffering revealed the truths that most people repress. Tragedy acted as a safe arena for the psyche, a place where audiences could feel the intensity of collapse without being destroyed by it. They could confront the Dionysian without drowning in it. They could see the fragile illusions of daily life without losing them completely. In the modern world, we lack such arenas. We have entertainment, but not catharsis. We have stories, but not transformation. We have stimulation, but not initiation. And without initiation, people face their inner Dionysian eruptions alone, unprepared, ashamed, confused. They collapse in private instead of being reborn in public ritual. The tragic becomes the personal. The universal becomes the secret. The sacred becomes the pathological. Nietzsche believes the great crisis of modern humanity is the loss of this public, cultural confrontation with the tragic. Without tragedy, we internalize everything. Instead of seeing suffering as part of the human condition, we believe it is a defect in us. Instead of seeing breakdowns as part of the existential rhythm, we interpret them as personal failures. We feel broken because we do not understand that collapse is woven into the architecture of existence. In this sense, Nietzsche claims we destroy ourselves because we no longer know how to fall. The Greeks taught people how to fall with dignity, how to allow the tragic to wash over them without becoming resentful or nihilistic. Modern people have not been taught this art. They cling desperately to their self-images, careers, routines, identities, and relationships. So, when a crack appears, they treat it as catastrophic. The Dionysian, when denied gradual release, returns as total rupture. And this rupture doesn't only occur in individuals, it appears in cultures. Nietzsche believes societies can also become too Apollonian, too obsessed with clarity, order, rationality, and progress. When this happens, the suppressed Dionysian returns in mass movements, collective frenzies, political chaos, cultural upheavals, or explosive social transformations. Entire nations can collapse for the same reason individuals collapse, because they mistake repression for stability. In a modern context, we can see this in the way societies oscillate violently between periods of strict order and chaotic reaction. The more rigid a culture becomes, the more likely it is to incubate an underground hunger for liberation. The longer a culture denies its own Dionysian instinct, the more violently that instinct returns, sometimes as revolution, sometimes as cultural breakdown, sometimes as moral panics or mass hysteria. Nietzsche describes this using Greek history, but the pattern is universal. Wherever the Apollonian dominates completely, the Dionysian waits for its moment to erupt. This eruption is not a malfunction of history, it is part of the rhythm of existence. Nietzsche's insight is that the tragic is not simply a feature of art or literature. It is a feature of life. A life without a tragic worldview is fragile. A culture without a tragic worldview is unstable. A person without a tragic worldview is unprepared for the forces inside them. But Nietzsche does not want us to fear these forces. He wants us to understand them, to accept them, to work with them rather than against them. The Apollonian and Dionysian are not enemies to be defeated. They are energies to be harmonized. And the key to avoiding self-destruction is not repression, but integration. The individual who learns the rhythm of these forces becomes resilient, flexible, creative, capable of transforming suffering into meaning, chaos into insight, collapse into renewal. The question Nietzsche poses is this: how can the modern human restore this lost integration? How do we live with the tragic honestly, rather than denial? How do we encounter our Dionysian depths without being consumed by them? And how do we rebuild a life in which collapse is not an end point, but a beginning? Next, we will explore Nietzsche's search for a rebirth of tragedy, and what it means for a person living today to awaken the lost harmony between Apollo and Dionysus. For all his ferocity, Nietzsche is not a pessimist. Beneath his analysis of collapse and self-destruction lies a deeper conviction that human beings are capable of rebirth. Not the cheap kind, not the kind preached in self-help slogans or motivational speeches, but a rebirth that is earned the same way ancient tragedy earned its power: by confronting suffering directly, without illusions. Nietzsche believes that the death of tragedy was not final. It was a wound in our cultural memory, a break in the lineage of wisdom, but not an extinction. The Dionysian can be exiled, criticised, mocked, denied, pathologized, but it cannot be killed. It is older than logic, older than morality, older than consciousness. It waits. And Nietzsche thinks it is waiting for us to rediscover it. The modern world, for Nietzsche, is sick precisely because it has forgotten the tragic worldview. We have become drunk on optimism, on the idea that progress will solve everything, that science will answer every question, that reason will illuminate every shadow. This optimism is not joy, it is avoidance. It is a refusal to admit that existence is riddled with contradictions, that life contains forces beyond our control, that suffering is not an obstacle, but a structural feature of reality. When optimism becomes absolute, it breeds denial. When denial builds, collapse is inevitable. Nietzsche believed that our culture is drowning in explanations, but starving for depth. We analyse everything and understand nothing. We comfort ourselves with interpretations and lose the ability to endure the truth behind them. And yet Nietzsche believes that a rebirth is possible, but only if we restore what the Greeks once held sacred: the marriage between the Apollonian and the Dionysian. He envisions a future where the human being is no longer torn between logic and instinct, no longer split between discipline and chaos, no longer ashamed of their suffering or terrified of their desires. He imagines a human being who can dance with both forces, who can give form to chaos without suffocating it, who can seek clarity without denying mystery, who can experience pain without dissolving into bitterness, who can look into the abyss without losing themselves. Nietzsche's hope lies not in going backward, but in going deeper. We cannot resurrect the ancient chorus, or rebuild Greek festivals, or return to the religious rituals that once contained the Dionysian. Our world is different. Our consciousness is stronger. Our disillusionment is greater. Our scientific knowledge is more vast. But Nietzsche believes that new forms of tragedy, new forms of art capable of reconciling the two halves of the soul, are still possible. He imagines a modern tragic art that is not sentimental, not moralizing, not therapeutic, not driven by optimism, but grounded in what he calls pessimism of strength, the courage to say yes to life even in its darkest moments. This pessimism of strength is not despair, it is the opposite of despair. It is the ability to embrace existence as it is, overflowing, excessive, contradictory, beautiful, terrifying, and still affirm it. The Greeks did not soften suffering, they honoured it. They gave it form. They found dignity in the midst of impossibility. They crafted tragedies not to eliminate pain, but to transform it into insight. And Nietzsche believes modern humanity must relearn this lost art. We must build new forms capable of holding our contradictions. New rituals, new music, new narratives, new ways of confronting the tragic without dissolving under its weight. In this sense, Nietzsche's philosophy is not merely descriptive, it is prescriptive. He is not just explaining why we destroy ourselves, he is trying to teach us how not to. He wants us to stop living as though suffering is a mistake, to stop imagining we can remove chaos through willpower, to stop treating the Dionysian as a pathology. He urges us to embrace the full range of our inner forces, to grow large enough to contain them, to become, as he puts it, a self-propelling wheel, a human being who is not torn apart by fate but strengthened by it. This is why Nietzsche places so much importance on music, not the decorative kind, not the background noise of our entertainment culture, but true music, music that reveals the structure of the will itself. Dionysian music is not melodic comfort, it is the vibration of existence. It speaks in a language older than words. It unites people not through meaning, but through feeling. It dissolves the ego and reveals the world beneath the surface. Nietzsche believed that music, at its highest power, could once again awaken the mythic dimension of life, and that through this awakening, tragedy could be reborn in a new modern form. But Nietzsche also knew that art alone is not enough. The individual must change. Each person must undergo a personal, inward rebirth, a recognition that the inner conflict between Apollo and Dionysus is not a flaw, but a fact. A recognition that our suffering has meaning, not because it teaches moral lessons or leads to predictable rewards, but because it connects us to the deeper pulse of existence. A recognition that collapse is not failure, it is a necessary phase in the cycle of transformation. To deny collapse is to deny growth. To deny chaos is to deny creation. This inward rebirth begins with honesty, a fierce, unsparing honesty about the parts of ourselves we repress. Nietzsche believed that most people lie to themselves far more than they lie to others. They lie about their desires, their fears, their insecurities, their ambitions, their resentments, their limitations. They lie in order to maintain an Apollonian image, but these lies accumulate, like pressure beneath the earth, and eventually the ground splits open. In this sense, Nietzsche sees self-destruction as a kind of forced honesty. When we fall apart, the truth that we could not face slowly rises to the surface. The tragedy is that most people never learn to read these truths. They patch themselves up, rebuild the persona, and continue living in denial. And so the cycle repeats. But Nietzsche also believes that some individuals, the rare, brave, visionary ones, can break this cycle. These individuals do not run from collapse. They do not panic when the Dionysian erupts. They listen to it. They use it. They transform it. They become, in Nietzsche's language, artists of life. People who give form to their contradictions, who shape their chaos into creativity, who turn their pain into power. For these individuals, the rebirth of tragedy is not a cultural event but a personal achievement. It happens inside them, it transforms them, and through them, it transforms the world. Nietzsche argues that a new tragic age requires a new kind of human being, one who can bear the full weight of existence without flinching, one who does not seek comfort in superficial optimism or resignation in nihilism, one who can hold both Apollo and Dionysus within themselves and let them coexist without demanding victory from either side. A human being who has the courage to see the world clearly, its beauty, its horror, its absurdity, its grandeur, and still say, yes. This yes is the heart of Nietzsche's philosophy. It is the greatest strength a human being can possess. It is the opposite of resentment, the opposite of bitterness, the opposite of self-destruction. It is acceptance without passivity, affirmation without naivety, courage without denial. To say yes in this way is to become what Nietzsche calls an artist philosopher, a creator of meaning, a person who shapes the raw, chaotic forces of life into something bearable, something beautiful, something true. In the modern world, this form of strength is rare, but necessary. Without it, Nietzsche believes societies collapse into nihilism and individuals collapse into despair. But with it, a new tragic culture can emerge. Not a return to the past, but a reawakening of what the past understood. A culture in which suffering is not hidden but honoured, in which contradiction is not pathologised but embraced, in which collapse is not feared but transformed. We will enter the final phase of Nietzsche's vision. How the individual becomes strong enough to withstand the tragic, and how the rebirth of tragedy begins not in society, but in you. If tragedy is not merely an art form but a way of seeing the world, then Nietzsche's greatest question becomes deeply personal. What kind of human being can endure such a vision? What kind of mind can look directly at the contradictions of existence, the suffering, the chaos, the irrationality, the impermanence, and not only remain intact but become stronger? Nietzsche does not believe this strength is distributed evenly across humanity, but he does believe it can be cultivated, and he believes its cultivation begins not with talent, intelligence, or education, but with the willingness to confront one's own illusions. Every person lives under the protection of the Apollonian dream. We all carry images of ourselves that soften reality, identities we cling to, narratives we rehearse, justifications we give meaning to. These illusions keep the self stable, just as a fragile ship needs a hull to survive the sea. But Nietzsche insists that every illusion, even the useful ones, eventually becomes too tight. The self grows underneath it, pressing against it, demanding more space. And this clash between inner expansion and outer confinement is the first sign that one is ready for the tragic worldview. For Nietzsche, awakening begins when the Apollonian mask cracks. Sometimes it cracks through loss. When a relationship ends, when a dream collapses, when the world betrays us. Sometimes it cracks through success, when we achieve what we wanted and discover that it did not give us the meaning we expected. Sometimes it cracks naturally, quietly, through age or introspection. But whenever it cracks, the Dionysian rushes in. This is why so many people fall apart when their illusions break. The self they meet beneath the mask is a stranger. The desires are unfamiliar. The emotions are overwhelming. The contradictions are frightening. The will is unpredictable. For Nietzsche, this moment, the confrontation with the deeper self, is where most people retreat. They patch the illusion, reinforce the mask, distract themselves, seek comfort, seek numbness. They protect the Apollonian at all costs, even if it means severing themselves from the deeper movement of their own becoming. Nietzsche calls this the instinct of decadence, the instinct to preserve stability even when it demands self-denial. And he warns that a person who repeatedly flees their own depths becomes smaller over time, narrower, weaker, more fragile. But the rare individual, the one Nietzsche calls a higher type, does something different. They remain with the chaos. They do not flee from the storm inside. They descend into it. They allow themselves to feel the irrational forces that move them, their hungers, their impulses, their fears, their strange desires, their anger, their longing, their creativity, their pain. Instead of treating these forces as threats to their identity, they treat them as raw material. Instead of suppressing contradiction, they learn to metabolize it. Instead of seeking order, they seek depth. It is here that Nietzsche brings back the central metaphor of the birth of tragedy, the marriage of the Dionysian and the Apollonian inside the individual. The strong person, Nietzsche says, is not the one who eliminates chaos, but the one who gives it a shape. Not the one who silences suffering, but the one who turns suffering into insight. Not the one who avoids experiences that overwhelm the self, but the one who expands the self to contain them. The strong individual does not collapse under the weight of contradiction because they do not expect themselves to be simple. They accept complexity as the basic condition of their existence. For Nietzsche, this inner work is not psychological healing. It is artistic creation. One does not fix oneself. One sculpts oneself. One becomes, in the deepest sense, a creator, not of music or literature or paintings, but of the self. And the tools of this creation are precisely the energies that others avoid: suffering, desire, fear, longing, failure, uncertainty. These are the materials from which tragedy, and therefore greatness, emerges. But Nietzsche also insists that this kind of self-creation requires solitude, not loneliness, not withdrawal. Solitude, a deliberate stepping away from external noise, social expectations, inherited beliefs and collective illusions. In solitude, one hears oneself clearly enough to distinguish between the Apollonian voice of identity and the Dionysian voice of instinct. One learns which thoughts belong to them and which belong to the world. One becomes intimate with the internal chaos that society forces everyone to ignore. In this solitude, Nietzsche believes a person discovers what he calls the great yes. This yes is not optimism. It is not the belief that everything will be okay. It is not comfort or hope. It is the acceptance of existence as it is, not clean, not orderly, not just, not predictable, but vast, incomprehensible and alive. It is a yes that embraces the terrifying beauty of the Dionysian and the fragile clarity of the Apollonian at the same time. It is a yes that transforms the individual into someone capable of enduring the tragic without disintegrating. This yes is the moment the individual becomes strong enough for tragedy. It is the moment they stop asking life for guarantees, the moment they stop needing explanations, the moment they stop bargaining with fate, the moment they stop resisting the nature of existence. It is the moment they become wide enough, deep enough, and flexible enough to hold the contradictions that define life. Nietzsche believes that this transformation marks the birth of a new kind of human being, one who can no longer be manipulated by comforting illusions, nor destroyed by chaos. A human being who can create beauty out of suffering without needing to escape it. A human being who is not controlled by their instincts but not alienated from them either. A human being who is not governed by fear. A human being who is not at war with themselves. This is the person who can bear tragedy. This is the person who can transcend nihilism. This is the person who can give new meaning to the world. And for Nietzsche, this person is not a mythical hero. It is a potential that lies dormant in every individual who is willing to confront themselves honestly. But he warns, the path is difficult. It demands courage. It demands patience. It demands the willingness to endure internal storms without collapsing back into comforting lies. But for those who can walk it, the reward is the most profound form of freedom. The freedom to affirm life without needing it to be different. We explore Nietzsche's ultimate revelation, why the world needs individuals strong enough for tragedy, and how these individuals reshape the future of culture itself. If Nietzsche is right, then a culture collapses not because of economic forces, or political failures, or social tensions, but because its people lose the strength to face the tragic. They become allergic to suffering, intolerant of contradiction, dependent on explanations, addicted to easy optimism. Nietzsche sees this all around him, and we see it even more clearly today. A world terrified of discomfort produces fragile individuals, and fragile individuals create fragile societies. The more we insist that life must be soft, predictable and harmless, the more we unravel the inner resilience required for life itself. Nietzsche believed that the decline of tragedy in ancient Greece marked the beginning of a cultural weakening, a turning away from the depth of the human condition toward cheap explanations, neat morality, and rationalistic comfort. And he believed something similar is happening now. To Nietzsche, strong individuals are not just important for themselves, they are essential for the survival of culture. It is the strong who create values, not the masses. It is the strong who define the tone of civilization. It is the strong who can look into the abyss of existence, pull meaning out of it, and return with an insight powerful enough to uplift others. The weak avoid the abyss. The strong descend into it. And when they return, they bring back something the world desperately needs: new forms of understanding, new expressions of beauty, new ways of living with suffering instead of denying it. A culture without individuals who can do this becomes hollow. It becomes sick. It becomes unable to bear even normal levels of difficulty. Nietzsche saw this in the decline of Athenian tragedy. We see it now in the decline of attention spans, the rise of addiction, the collapse of deep relationships, the fear of silence, the obsession with constant stimulation. These are symptoms, not causes. The cause is deeper, a loss of tragic strength. Nietzsche argues that societies need tragedies because tragedies train the soul. They force people to witness suffering without retreating. They teach the audience to see beauty in pain, not because pain is good, but because it is inevitable. And meaning emerges from how it is confronted. Tragedy does not remove suffering. It reveals its structure. It shows that pain is not a mistake. It shows that contradiction is not chaos. It shows that life is not something we control, but something we participate in. When tragedy dies, this education disappears. And when this education disappears, people become psychologically defenseless against the weight of existence. But Nietzsche also knew that tragedy could not be revived simply by imitating the past. We cannot return to the Greek chorus or the Dionysian festivals. Our consciousness is too far developed. The illusions that sustained ancient rituals no longer work on us. What we need is not a restoration, but an evolution. New forms of art, new forms of philosophy, new forms of self-understanding, new ways of experiencing the unity of the Apollonian and the Dionysian without reverting to primitive intoxication or modern escapism. This is why Nietzsche places so much hope in the individual creator. He is not waiting for governments or institutions or religions to resurrect tragedy. He's waiting for individuals strong enough to embody the tragic worldview within themselves. People whose very existence becomes a kind of living tragedy, not in a theatrical sense, but in the Greek sense, a profound, honest, courageous engagement with the depth of being. Such individuals do not preach easy truths. They do not comfort people. They do not offer shallow optimism. Instead, they offer an example, a demonstration of how a person can hold vast internal contradictions without breaking. They show what it looks like to embrace the Dionysian without losing form, and to embrace the Apollonian without losing intensity. They demonstrate that suffering, if endured consciously, can become insight. They demonstrate that fear, if faced directly, can become freedom. They demonstrate that chaos, if approached with strength, can become creation. This is the essence of Nietzsche's cultural vision. Not a society of comfort, safety, and uniformity, but a society shaped by individuals who have passed through the fire of their own becoming. And yet, Nietzsche is not naive. He knows that most people will never become this kind of individual. He knows that the tragic requires a rare strength, a combination of sensitivity and resilience, intellect and instinct, discipline and madness. He knows that this path is dangerous. Many who descend into their depths do not come back. Many who try to integrate the Dionysian are swallowed by it. Many who attempt to challenge their illusions end up lost in nihilism. But Nietzsche believes that the risk is necessary, that without the individuals who dare to make this descent, culture becomes empty, that without at least a few human beings who confront the tragic, honestly, society becomes sentimental, reactive, fearful, and weak. These strong individuals, Quentin, whom Nietzsche sometimes calls artists, sometimes philosophers, sometimes free spirits, sometimes dancers, become the backbone of cultural renewal. They do not rule through power, but through presence. Their way of being becomes luminous. Their insights become contagious. Their example becomes a kind of invitation, an invitation to others to face themselves more honestly, to accept their contradictions, to find meaning in suffering instead of fleeing from it. Nietzsche believes that cultural strength radiates outward from the psychological strength of individuals. When the inner life is strong, the outer world becomes strong. When the inner life collapses, everything collapses. This, then, is why the world needs individuals strong enough for tragedy, because they keep culture alive. They prevent society from dissolving into illusions or descending into emptiness. They remind us that life is not a puzzle to be solved, but a depth to be entered. They remind us that suffering is not a punishment, but a condition of existence. They remind us that contradictions are not flaws, but features of our nature. They remind us that we are not meant to be simple. We are meant to be vast. Nietzsche's hope is that enough individuals will undergo this inner transformation, this marriage of the Apollonian and Dionysian, to ignite a cultural rebirth. Not a return to the old world, but the birth of a new one. A world in which art, philosophy and psychology are integrated. A world in which suffering is not hidden. A world in which illusions serve life rather than suffocate it. A world in which human beings are strong enough to say yes to existence without needing to justify or sanitize it. But this hope leads to Nietzsche's final question. The question he leaves hanging like a silent chord at the end of a tragic symphony. Can modern humans become strong enough for this task? Or has the weakening gone too far? When a culture loses its connection to tragedy, Nietzsche believes something catastrophic begins to unfold. Not all at once, not with explosions or revolutions, but slowly, quietly, internally. A kind of spiritual thinning spreads through society. The symbols lose their power. The myths lose their meaning. The rituals lose their necessity. People stop asking difficult questions and start demanding easy answers. They forget how to endure suffering and instead seek to eliminate it. They forget how to confront contradiction and instead seek to deny it. They forget how to carry depth and instead cling to surfaces. Nietzsche calls this condition decadence, not in the moralistic sense, but in the biological sense, a weakening of the instinct for life. In a decadent culture, Nietzsche says, people begin to experience the world as fundamentally burdensome. Even small challenges feel overwhelming. Minor disappointments feel catastrophic. The self becomes fragile, hypersensitive, unable to bear tension. When the tragic worldview disappears, the worldview that knows suffering is part of existence, people become confused by their own pain. They interpret every discomfort as a sign that something has gone wrong. They interpret uncertainty as an injustice. They interpret limitation as a personal attack. Without the tragic, suffering loses context, loses dignity, loses meaning. And so it becomes intolerable. This intolerance leads to the rise of what Nietzsche calls theoretical man, a human being who believes that life can be solved the way a mathematician solves an equation. Theoretical man wants explanations, guarantees, certainty. He wants the world to be legible, predictable, orderly. He wants suffering to make sense, contradictions to disappear, complexity to be flattened into clarity. And when the world refuses to cooperate, because reality is not designed to be logical, theoretical man becomes angry, resentful, disoriented. He seeks someone to blame: society, fate, circumstance, other people, himself. The result is a culture full of people who feel perpetually wronged by existence. A culture where people demand safety from reality. A culture where people believe they deserve protection from the very conditions that make life meaningful. Nietzsche sees this as the deepest danger of losing the tragic. People begin to believe they should not have to suffer. And once this belief enters the bloodstream of society, collapse is inevitable. When a culture no longer accepts suffering as part of life, it falls into two possible outcomes: nihilism or fanaticism. Nihilism arises when people conclude that if suffering has no meaning, then life itself has no meaning. Fanaticism arises when people assign false meaning to suffering, creating ideologies, moral systems, political movements or religious fantasies that promise salvation from pain. Both outcomes are attempts to escape the tragic. Both outcomes, Nietzsche says, lead to spiritual decay. This is why Nietzsche insists that the rebirth of tragedy is not merely an artistic question, it is a survival question. Without the tragic, a culture becomes psychologically defenseless. It loses the ability to metabolize chaos. It loses the ability to face the unknown. It loses the ability to grow through adversity. And because suffering is inevitable, a culture that cannot transform suffering becomes crushed by it. It breaks into factions, resentments, anxieties, addictions, escapism. Its people fall into intellectual shallowness, emotional instability, and moral rigidity. A culture without tragedy begins to worship comfort, and a culture that worships comfort inevitably creates individuals who fear life. Nietzsche believes this is one of the greatest dangers of modernity, the attempt to engineer a world without hardship, without risk, without raw experience. He warns that such attempts may succeed, but at the cost of the human spirit. If we remove the conditions that produce depth, we remove the possibility of greatness. If we remove the conditions that demand courage, we remove the capacity for courage. If we remove the conditions that confront us with contradiction, we remove the chance to become whole. But Nietzsche does not leave us in despair. He believes that even in a decadent culture, individuals can resist. Individuals can break the pattern. Individuals can rebuild what society has forgotten. The rebirth of tragedy does not require a mass movement. It requires individuals willing to descend into themselves and confront the Dionysian directly. Individuals willing to shatter their illusions. Individuals willing to hold their suffering with dignity instead of resentment. Individuals willing to face contradiction without demanding resolution. These individuals become, in Nietzsche's eyes, the seeds of cultural renewal. They do not preach, they do not persuade, they do not form movements. They simply become what the culture has lost. And their existence awakens others. Nietzsche calls this the work of the higher solitary. The person who stands alone not because they reject the world, but because they refuse to live falsely within it. The person who seeks not freedom from suffering, but freedom through suffering. The person who has become large enough inwardly to contain the tragic. This is the final descent, understanding that the fate of a culture ultimately rests on the strength of its individuals. Not leaders, not institutions, individuals. Those who carry the tragic within themselves, who embody the unity of Apollo and Dionysus, who hold the tension without breaking. Those who can look into the abyss with steady eyes and rise from it not with despair, but with creation. And now, with the groundwork laid, we arrive at the emotional and philosophical climax of the episode. Nietzsche's final answer to why humans destroy themselves, and how a rare few transform destruction into rebirth. And so, here we are, at the edge of Nietzsche's world, and at the edge of our own. A world where people try desperately not to suffer, and suffer more because of it. A world where meaning collapses under its own weight. A world where illusions multiply, promising comfort but delivering fragility. A world where we destroy ourselves not because we are broken, but because we are unfinished, unrealised, untested. Nietzsche never asked us to worship suffering. He only asked us to stop lying about it. Because somewhere beneath the noise of our ambitions, beneath the masks we wear, beneath the fear we carry, there is a deeper pulse. A rhythm older than language, older than memory, older even than civilization. The Apollonian and the Dionysian, form and chaos, reason and instinct, light and shadow. Two halves of a single mind, two forces of a single life, two voices whispering inside every human being. Most people spend their whole lives choosing one and running from the other. They cling to order, terrified of what lies beneath it. Or they drown in chaos, terrified of stillness. And Nietzsche's warning is simple. Whenever we reject half of ourselves, we begin to collapse. Every breakdown, every crisis, every moment when life rips through the armour we built. These aren't punishments, they're reminders, signals that we've grown too small for the illusions that once protected us, signals that the self we're clinging to cannot contain the life we're meant to live. And maybe that's why we destroy ourselves. Because destruction is sometimes the only way the deeper self can break through. But Nietzsche believed something else too, something quiet, something almost tender. He believed that inside every collapse is a seed, a possibility, a beginning. He believed that human beings can remake themselves the way artists remake clay. That suffering is not the enemy of life, but the raw material from which life sculpts itself into something stronger, deeper, more honest. You are not meant to be simple. You are not meant to be consistent. You are not meant to be one thing. You are a tension, a living contradiction, a meeting point between forces that have been in conflict since the beginning of consciousness. And if you can learn to hold that tension without breaking, something extraordinary happens. You become the kind of person Nietzsche spent his entire life searching for, the kind of person who can walk through chaos without losing their shape, the kind of person who can face suffering without retreating into lies, the kind of person whose very existence becomes a quiet act of rebellion against a culture that fears depth, a person strong enough for tragedy, a person strong enough for truth, a person strong enough for life. And maybe tonight, as the world outside goes quiet, as your mind sinks into that soft, drifting darkness, you can feel a small part of that strength waking up inside you. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to remind you of something you've always known, but never said out loud. You are more than your fears. You are more than your fractures. You are more than the illusions you once needed. You are the artist of your own becoming. And the night is where the becoming begins. Sleep deeply, think freely, become slowly. And when you wake, perhaps you'll carry a little more courage into the morning. This is Night Scholar with Elias Kensington. Good night, dream well, and may you meet the parts of yourself you've been avoiding.